The Mary Celeste is a tale of eerie abandonment and unanswered questions, one that continues to stir imaginations over 150 years after it happened. Picture the scene. A ship, seemingly intact and perfectly seaworthy, drifting alone on the vast and silent expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. It was found in December 1872, with no trace of its crew, leaving behind a chilling sense of mystery. The Mary Celeste was a three-masted brigantine, her sturdy wooden frame a symbol of the best shipbuilding craftsmanship of the time. Aboard her, Captain Benjamin Briggs, a respected and seasoned sailor, was accompanied by his wife Sarah and their young daughter Sophia. In addition to the family, a crew of 7 men was present, all of whom were experienced seamen, accustomed to the rigors of long voyages. The vessel was en route to Genoa, Italy, when she vanished from sight. On November 7, the ship departed from New York with a load of denatured alcohol. The weather was calm, and the skies clear, suggesting a routine journey ahead. But in the days that followed, an inexplicable event occurred. The Mary Celeste was swallowed by the ocean, her crew vanishing without a trace. Nearly a month later, on December 5, the Dei Gratia, a British ship commanded by Captain David Morehouse, came across the drifting Mary Celeste about 400 miles east of the Azores. Morehouse's crew was alarmed by the sight of the ship. Her sails were set, and she was moving, but there was no one at the helm. The ship's course was erratic, with the wind not enough to explain her forward movement, and the hull appeared to be in good condition, with no signs of immediate damage. Upon boarding the Mary Celeste, Morehouse and his men found the ship seemingly abandoned in a hurry. The captain's personal effects were still in place, and the cargo, a valuable load of alcohol, was mostly undisturbed. The ship's logbook was open to the last entry, dated November 25, and it was clear the crew had left the ship in the middle of the ocean without explanation. There were no signs of violence. The ship's wheel was still fixed, suggesting no immediate emergency had prompted a sudden departure. The lifeboat was gone, as though the crew had taken it in a rush. But in what would become one of the most peculiar aspects of the mystery, there were no other vessels in sight, and no one ever reported seeing the ship again. The Mary Celeste had simply been found adrift, her crew nowhere to be found. Among the things left behind, some minor details added to the puzzle. A few items, like personal belongings and even some of the crew's clothing, were scattered around the deck. The ship's pump had been disassembled, leading some to believe the crew feared water had begun to leak into the ship. However, there was no visible damage to the ship's structure, and the cargo of alcohol appeared completely intact, a clear indication that there hadn't been a catastrophe. Theories to explain the disappearance range from the plausible to the fantastical. One explanation is that the crew might have been startled by a natural phenomenon, perhaps a sudden and violent waterspout, which could have caused panic and led them to abandon ship. Another suggests that the alcohol fumes may have caused a dangerous explosion scare, prompting the crew to flee, but this is countered by the fact that no explosion or fire was found aboard the ship. Some speculate that the crew may have been affected by hallucinations or a mental breakdown, possibly triggered by isolation or a psychological disorder. Others suggest that a more sinister event took place, such as mutiny or piracy, though no evidence of violence or theft has ever been found. In the years following the discovery, the Mary Celeste was salvaged and sold, though it never quite escaped the aura of its fateful voyage. The ship continued to change hands, but each new owner seemed to meet with misfortune. The Mary Celeste eventually ran aground in 1885 near Haiti, where it was lost for good. In the decades since, the mystery of the Mary Celeste has been fodder for authors, filmmakers, and theorists alike. Its story, filled with a sense of the unknown, taps into a primal human fear of being alone in an immense, uncaring world, where even the most experienced sailors and the most sturdy ships can vanish without a trace. The ghostly image of an abandoned vessel, moving through the ocean without a soul to steer it, remains one of the most haunting maritime mysteries ever to befall the sea. The Mary Celeste's fate is shrouded in layers of eerie details, each one compounding the sense of mystery that surrounds her story. As the ship floated abandoned in the Atlantic, questions mounted about the missing crew and the sudden and unexplained disappearance. The Mary Celeste was found in a condition that defied expectations for an abandoned vessel. Rather than being in a state of decay, or showing signs of damage or distress, it was eerily pristine. The ship's cargo, including the highly flammable alcohol, had not been disturbed in any meaningful way, leading many to question whether the crew had indeed left in a panic or if they had been taken without a struggle. One of the striking features of the Mary Celeste's discovery was that the ship's course seemed deliberate. There was no immediate sign of any extreme event, such as a storm or collision, that might have caused her to drift. The crew's personal items were left behind undisturbed, including their clothing, bedding, and personal effects, but the lifeboat was gone. It was assumed that the crew had boarded the lifeboat with the intention of returning to the ship after whatever event had prompted them to leave, but they never did. There were no visible signs of their fate. Perhaps one of the most puzzling details was the ship's logbook, which held the last entry from Captain Briggs on November 25. After that date, there was a gap in the log. No further information about what happened to the ship. This suggested that something untoward occurred suddenly, leaving no time to record a final event. The ship's provisions, such as the food stores and water, were mostly untouched, which led some to speculate that the crew was planning to return after a short departure, possibly due to a temporary emergency. But what emergency could have occurred that caused the crew to abandon the ship with so little explanation and no visible signs of harm? The ship's navigational instruments, like the compass and chronometer, were missing, leading some to suggest a deliberate act by the crew, but again, the absence of other evidence of a crime or foul play makes this theory difficult to accept fully. Speculative theories and continued mysticism. The most prominent theory that has surfaced over time is that the Mary Celeste was a victim of some sort of unprovoked panic. It's been hypothesized that Captain Briggs and his crew may have encountered a natural phenomenon, like a rogue wave or waterspout. This could have created a massive sense of fear or urgency, prompting the crew to flee. However, the ship showed no signs of distress from such an event. The theory of a waterspout, for example, doesn't quite explain the calm, collected nature of the ship's condition when found, especially given that no damage was done to the sails or rigging. Another explanation involves the ship's cargo, denatured alcohol. Some have theorized that fumes from the alcohol, which were potentially volatile in enclosed spaces, may have caused an explosion scare or some kind of chemical mishap. Perhaps the crew thought the ship was about to explode and, in a panic, abandoned the ship. While this theory has the potential to explain the ship's desertion, it falls short due to the fact that no signs of fire or an explosion were present. Other theories lean into the more supernatural or speculative. Some people have suggested that the Mary Celeste became the victim of a curse. The story of the Mary Celeste is certainly ripe for ghostly interpretations. Its eerily quiet drifting, an apparent uneventful voyage that abruptly turned sinister. Could the ship have been doomed from the start? In folklore, a ship that is abandoned in such a way is sometimes thought to be cursed, and many have speculated that the ship's fate was influenced by a malevolent force. Additionally, the possibility of mutiny or piracy was raised early on, particularly as the ship was found without the captain and crew. But there was little to no evidence to suggest this. The cargo was largely intact, and there were no signs of violence or forced entry, so the theory of an attack seemed unlikely. The ship's later years, a legacy of misfortune after her discovery, the Mary Celeste was eventually salvaged and towed to Gibraltar. At first, it seemed that the ship would be repaired and continue her service, but she was sold several times to different owners, none of whom fared well. The ship was involved in a series of misfortunes, including incidents of mismanagement and strange occurrences that seemed to add fuel to the fire of the ship's mysterious aura. In 1885, the Mary Celeste was finally abandoned for good after running aground on a reef off the coast of Haiti. It was reported that the ship had been improperly anchored and suffered damage during a storm. However, many at the time believed that the ship was simply the victim of bad luck or, perhaps, a final echo of the dark energy that had haunted her from the moment she was found drifting without her crew. Enduring fascination and legacy. The legend of the Mary Celeste has become one of the most enduring maritime mysteries, capturing the imagination of people around the world. Writers, filmmakers, and researchers continue to revisit the case, seeking answers where there may never be any. Each new theory about the Mary Celeste adds layers to the story, and yet, No one has ever been able to piece together a definitive explanation for the fate of Captain Briggs, his family, and the crew. What makes the Mary Celeste such a compelling mystery is not just the disappearance of the people aboard, but the unanswered nature of the event. It taps into a primal fear, the fear of being lost, of being alone in the vastness of the ocean, and of encountering an unknown fate that we may never understand. The Mary Celeste remains an enduring symbol of the inexplicable, a ghost ship adrift on the waves of history, carrying with it a mystery that may never be solved. The Mary Celeste remains an enigma not just because of the disappearance of its crew but also because of the lasting questions about the ship itself. Over time, the Mary Celeste has become more than just a maritime mystery. It's a symbol of the unknown and a chilling example of how the sea can hold secrets that seem beyond human comprehension. The unanswered questions surrounding her fate have led to endless speculation, with every detail scrutinized and analyzed in the hopes of piecing together the puzzle. The ship itself. A vessel of contradictions, the Mary Celeste was an oddity in itself, straddling the line between a well-maintained merchant vessel and a ship marked by an air of foreboding. Built in 1861 in Nova Scotia, she was a sturdy brigantine designed for the merchant trade, capable of carrying cargo across the Atlantic. She had been a reliable ship in her earlier years and had sailed many successful voyages. However, after the mysterious abandonment, the ship became synonymous with disaster, misfortune, and a sense of the uncanny. From a practical standpoint, the Mary Celeste seemed well equipped for its journey. The ship had no glaring structural weaknesses, and it was carrying a cargo of denatured alcohol, which was valuable but not inherently dangerous under normal circumstances. The ship had a sound reputation for being seaworthy, and Captain Briggs was known for his caution and experience. Yet, the fate of the ship casts a shadow over these otherwise reassuring facts, making it even more perplexing. The disappearance. A study in silence. When Captain Morehouse of the Dei Gratia boarded the Mary Celeste, he found nothing overtly alarming, yet the absence of its crew was a clear mystery. The Mary Celeste had been found drifting, its sails set but loosely, and with no signs of distress that would indicate it had been abandoned due to an emergency. The ship's condition was strangely undisturbed. No damage, no signs of battle or violence, no open hatches or signs of ransacking. The cargo of alcohol was secure, and the ship appeared to have been left in a deliberate, orderly fashion. This was not a case of a storm tossing the ship around or a sudden disaster like a fire or explosion tearing the ship apart. Yet, the ship was also not exactly normal. The galley had been left untidy, but the tables were set as if they had been abandoned mid-meal. Captain Briggs' personal possessions, his logbook, a Bible, and even his clothes, remained in place, untouched by time or any apparent attempt at theft. Most remarkably, the crew's absence was so complete that there were no traces of where they had gone. The lifeboat, however, was gone, and this was one of the few concrete clues that suggested an attempt to leave the ship. But why? What could possibly have driven the crew to abandon a perfectly functional vessel in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Hypotheses. What could have caused the crew to vanish? Theories surrounding the Mary Celeste's abandonment are varied and continue to evolve, but none offer definitive answers. As the years have passed, the mystery has only deepened, making it fertile ground for imaginative explanations: natural disaster or fear of impending danger. One theory that has persisted is that the crew of the Mary Celeste experienced some sort of natural phenomenon, like a waterspout or rogue wave, that caused them to panic. Sailors at the time believed such events could be harbingers of disaster, causing extreme fear and irrational behavior. A sudden storm or freak wave could have triggered an intense reaction, leading the crew to believe the ship was doomed. However, the ship showed no signs of having encountered a storm, and this theory remains largely speculative. Fumes from the cargo. Another possibility involves the ship's cargo of denatured alcohol. Some theorists suggest that the fumes from the alcohol could have caused the crew to feel lightheaded or ill, or perhaps sparked a small fire or explosion scare. Fearing that the ship would explode, the crew may have panicked and abandoned the vessel. However, given the ship's intact condition and the lack of evidence for an explosion or fire, this theory, too, remains unlikely. Still, it's one of the most widely discussed because it offers a plausible explanation for sudden panic in the absence of visible signs of violence. Mutiny or piracy. Another popular theory, particularly in the early days after the Mary Celeste was found, was that the crew had mutinied or been attacked by pirates. But no signs of violence, struggle, or looting were discovered, making this theory hard to support. Additionally, there were no reports of pirate activity in the area at the time, and the ship's valuable cargo was left untouched. If piracy had been involved, it seemed unlikely that the attackers would have spared the cargo and left everything else untouched. Psychological factors or hallucinations. Some have suggested that the crew may have experienced mass hysteria or collective hallucinations, perhaps induced by the isolation of the voyage or the stress of the long journey. The idea is that fear or psychological pressure could have led to the crew abandoning ship for reasons that were not based on any real danger. While this theory is speculative, it taps into the idea that the mind, when under extreme duress, can create vivid illusions or fears, prompting irrational actions. Supernatural explanations. As is often the case with unsolved mysteries, supernatural theories have flourished. Some believe the Mary Celeste was cursed or haunted by malevolent forces. The idea that a ship could become possessed by some dark force is a recurring theme in folklore. According to this theory, the crew may have been cursed by the ship itself or the spirits of past sailors. Given the strange and eerie circumstances of the abandonment, this supernatural angle has continued to captivate the imagination of storytellers and mystics alike. The impact of the Mary Celeste mystery on popular culture. The disappearance of the Mary Celeste has continued to inspire countless works of fiction and speculation, making it a central part of maritime lore. From novels and documentaries to movies and TV shows, the tale of the ghost ship has become a symbol of the inexplicable, a metaphor for the vast unknowns that lie beyond the familiar world of human understanding. The story of the Mary Celeste has endured not just because of its mystery, but because it touches on deeper themes: isolation, fear, the limits of human knowledge, and the unpredictability of the natural world. For some, it represents a reminder of how small and fragile humanity is in the face of the immense forces of nature. For others, it symbolizes the restless curiosity that compels us to search for answers even when no easy answers exist. Conclusion. A legacy of the unknown. Today, the Mary Celeste stands as a monument to the mysteries of the sea, a haunting reminder that, despite our best efforts to control and understand the world, some things will forever remain beyond our grasp. The ship's fate is one of the great unsolved mysteries of maritime history. Its ghostly image as a vessel adrift without a crew continues to linger in the minds of those who study its story, and its legacy ensures that the Mary Celeste will be remembered as one of the greatest maritime puzzles of all time. The Mary Celeste will always be more than a mere historical curiosity. She is a ghost ship, and as long as her story is told, she will continue to haunt the imagination of those who wonder what happened to her crew and why she was abandoned in the vast, silent ocean.